I'm Julie Herman of Jaybird Quilts, and welcome back to the Joy Sew Along. In our previous two videos, we have made our J, and then in our last video, we went ahead and made the O. Today, we're going to focus on piecing the Y. Let's get started. After you have cut out all of your shapes for your Y, lay them out, make sure that you're happy with the placement and you have everything you need. Then, following the directions, we're going to get started on piecing. If you don't have these, please make sure that you click the link in the description to download the free Joy pattern for this sew along. With Y, we're going to begin in doing some units that are the same as what we did with J. So those are going to seem quite familiar. We're going to piece these two half triangles to this triangle and these two half triangles to this triangle. So I'm going to head on over to the machine so we can get started. I have my machine set to the same settings that I did while working on the J and the O, and that is a scant 1/4 inch seam with Aurifil 50 weight thread. I'm using 2600, it's my favorite medium gray. I find it blends into almost everything. It's what I tend to piece with 90+% of the time. So following my directions, as I mentioned, we're going to sew these units. This is step 1, this is step 2. Since I know what I'm doing because I've already done these with the J, I'm going to go ahead and chain piece. And again, you can cut your blunt points if you find that helpful. There is a couple places with the Y block that I do suggest doing that. So when we get to those points, I will make sure to point that out to you. So I'm going to grab that one, and then I'm going to take this one. I'm really enjoying how my Joy is coming together, and I'm looking forward to finishing it and getting to use it in my home. I think these blues are turning out great. Okay, so I'm just going to finger press this and use my Violet Craft seam roller. I will get my iron turned on in a little bit, but for these small pieces, I'm going to do that without my iron. So I'm going to add my second half triangle to my top rectangle. I should say triangle, half triangle unit that will become a rectangle. And I'm going to press this one open as well. Now I'm going to sew back onto my leader ender so that I have both of these pieces free. I'll open up my final two seams so I can sew the two of these together. These two units are going to create the bottom stem of my Y, and they are arranged so that the points meet up in the middle. You can pin those to match them exactly if you'd like. I usually have pretty good success eyeballing it since these are the same exact size as each other and they're pretty small, but you do what you feel comfortable with. I am going to grab my stiletto because I've got a little bit of bulk here with my seams coming together for my points, and I want to make sure to keep that under, and I'm lining my needle right up on the top of that point. So hopefully my points will match very nicely in the middle there. Let's see how that turned out. Pretty good. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to head on over and get my next pieces together to continue piecing this block. So I'm now going to bring this unit back over to my design area. I mentioned that with the J and the O, and I do it with the Y as well because it's very easy to get things turned around, put things in the wrong place. So I want to bring it back to make sure that I'm double checking all the time that everything is arranged how I want it to. Now so that was step 1, 2, and 3. Step 4 and step 5 are to sew these together. And because of how our half triangles are cut, when we go to put these like this, there is no alignment point. So it could be very easy to go a little too far up, a little too far down. Instinctively, from squares, we're used to lining things up, and if you put point to point when you sew your seam and open it, it's gonna look a little something like this, which is definitely not right. You're gonna have extra piece up there and down here, and it's not going to be the correct rectangle. So I find it very essential and helpful with these to cut the points off. I have shown you how to do that with the Hexamore and with the mini Hexamore, so now I'm gonna show you how to do it with the Super Sidekick. So with the Super Sidekick, we don't have the two sides that we line up. Let me show you again. So with the Hexamore, we just line up the two sides. With the Super Sidekick, we line up this side and then this solid black line. So ignore everything that's over here. We're going to line up this solid line and then this edge of the ruler. And so that's where we're going to be. And simply trim. And do that for the other piece as well. Trim. And so now when we go to sew these two together, we know exactly where to put them. We're just going to line that up there and line that up there. So our scant 1/4 inch seam, and that will perfectly be the rectangle that we need it to be. So I'm going to go ahead. That was my two rights, which are on the bottom right of my block. I'm now going to repeat the process with my two lefts, which will be for the left part of my block. So same, it's very similar. I'm going to line up here and here, but instead of it coming this way, it's just going to be more towards the edge there because this is a left triangle. Trim. And all of the triangles that you cut off, regardless of if you're cutting them off from a triangle, a diamond, a half triangle, they should all be the same size. So if you somehow end up with one that's way bigger or way smaller than all of the rest of yours, that is a red flag to you that something is off, because these should all be the same size. So I now have these all trimmed, and I'm going to head on over to my machine and sew this pair and this pair. So I'm back at my machine so that I can sew my half triangles into rectangles. And you may be asking yourself, why is this not just cut as a rectangle? And the answer is because it would be 4.5 inches tall, easy part, by a fractional number wide. And it's really hard to communicate what that would be. And every block is so different, and this is just needed for the Y at this time. So after lots of trial and error and considering options, realized that this was just the best solution, was to continue to use the ruler so that everything really is puzzle pieces. So I'm going to simply press this open and do the same with the other piece, and then I'm going to turn my iron on so that I can press these well as the center stem of my Y before I move on to step 6. Got my iron on and my pressing station set up, and just as I did with the J and the O, I want to make sure that I'm pressing. Pressing is up and down, ironing is back and forth. We're working with bias here and we don't want to stretch anything. And I'm pressing all my seams open. It will minimize the bulk and spread things out. I like to press from the back and from the front. These are obviously easier because they just have one seam. This has a few already in it, so it's going to take a little more love, but not too much. And now step 6 is simply to complete the bottom half of my Y. So with a 1/4 inch seam, so this onto this side and this onto this side. So I'm going to head back on over to the machine to finish the bottom half of my block. One more quick note is you might be wondering, does it matter which of these is where? And the answer is, unless you have something fussy cut, no, they can be technically completely rotated. The way that I designed the block is to have them pointing in towards the Y, and the reason for that is to avoid having this seam up here. so that there's only 3 pieces coming together here and 3 pieces coming together here. If I flipped them, there'd be 4. And since we still have other pieces we're sewing on, I wanted to alleviate the bulk and put the bulk here instead. So simply going to sew, and you can do that with either piece on top. These are technically the same size as each other if you put them on top of each other. You will discover that. And I don't need to worry about pressing this seam at all yet because nothing is intersecting with it. So I can just simply take this one over here, push this one out of the way, and sew my second piece on. Use my stiletto, make sure nothing gets caught. All of these tools are by no means required, the seam roller, the stiletto. They're just things that I find handy, that I genuinely use and keep right here by my machine. So I'm going to go ahead and head on over to the iron so that I can press this. I'm over here at the iron, and if you have ever wondered what it is like to film this and does it take longer to sew, the answer is yes, it takes so much longer. It's worth it because I really do enjoy teaching, but I am moving back and forth in ways that are not natural to how I usually sew, and I have things set up so that the cameras and the lights, so there is a lot of back and forth, but like I said, it's worth it. I really do enjoy teaching and sharing my knowledge with you, and I love Alphabet Soup. This book, I wrote it originally 5 years ago, and a lot has changed in 5 years. I've become a mom, I have 2 kids, and I use these projects more than many others that I have created, and so I really do enjoy sharing this, and I am looking forward to, we're going to do a full Alphabet Soup sew along coming next year. More details to come on that. So now there is the bottom half of my Y, and now it's time to put my top half together. And we're going to start with step 7, which is to sew these 2 pieces together. So simply right sides together, sew, and then step 8 is to sew this piece here, so we can then sew these together. When I'm not sewing on camera, my pressing station and sewing station are right next to each other. But when I'm doing demonstrations for you, I have them set up a little differently. And so I will often pin because I'm moving things around more and I don't want to mix them up. So you don't need to pin here at this stage if you don't feel like you need to. It's just 2 small pieces being held together. I pinned because I didn't want to mix up which piece went where, because in this situation for step 7, we're sewing a triangle onto the short side of the half hexagon to create a larger triangle, and then for 8 we're sewing it in a different place. I'll show you that in a moment. So I just wanted to make sure that I didn't mess up the placement. So that's my 7, and then what my 8 is I'm sewing it, instead of this short side, I'm sewing it to this short side, and I'm creating kind of an elongated double diamond here. So it's easy to get confused and accidentally sew it there, but that's not what I want specifically for this letter. I want it down here. So I'm going to flip this on top, and I can sew with either piece on top here. It can be tempting to work on multiple letters at one time, to just keep chain piecing. And once you become extremely familiar with these letters, that is possible. I still recommend constantly putting things back on your design wall. But in the beginning, I really do find it's easier to work on one letter at a time, even if you have to keep going onto your scrap very often. There's just a lot of pieces, and it's just easy to mix things up. And when you don't mix them up, it's a perfect little puzzle. This is my background, so that is up. This is my feature fabric, so that is down. So I'm not going to head back on the design wall. I'm just going to show you this here at the sewing machine. And there is nothing that is going to show me where this middle lines up. These are not going to nest when I flip them. You see one goes one way, one goes the other way. It's not a normal 4-patch. And I also don't have any alignment points. So I'm going to go ahead again and bust out my mini Hexamore and find a rotary cutter. And I'm going to trim off my sharp points so that I know exactly where things are going to line up. So trim that one off. And then trim this one off. Don't be afraid to trim them all in the beginning, to trim as you go like I am, to make changes throughout. You don't have to trim them all. You can trim some. You can choose to do it as you go, as I have been doing. And again, if you have questions, please ask them. Rachel and I are here to help you. So now that I have those 2 sharp ones trimmed off, I know exactly where the end pieces are lining up. And the only thing I can show you for where the center, that is like a little bit of a double check, is when your seam allowance is pressed open, that point of where your seam allowance is pressed open is going to line up with that point of that seam. And then the same for this side. So this seam allowance that is pressed open, that point where it's going to fold onto itself is where that seam comes together. So it's not a big double check. It's definitely, I find, easier to worry about the ends and not obsess too much over the center. It usually lines up pretty well. I'm just going to line up the one end and the other end, and let's see how it goes. So what I just did was step 9, sewing the 2 units from 7 and 8 together, and it turned out pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It's good enough for me. So I'm going to head back on over to my iron to press that. Oh, I'm back here at my pressing station. I'm going to finger press this open and go ahead and press this with my iron. And now I just need to add these to complete my top half of my Y. And I am not going to trim these off because I have the top placement, which I find is just enough for me. But if you want to trim them, you can. And since there's plenty of space, you can put them both on at the same time. Head on over to the machine and follow diagram of step 10, sew those 1/4 inch seams. So I have my right and left half triangles. Just going to double check the placement there and go ahead and sew these on. And this step will conclude the top half of my Y block. And then I will have 2 rectangles that I need to sew together to complete the Y block. So as you can see, a lot of the skills are the same or build upon each other between the letters. And that goes for all the letters of the alphabet. If you can sew the J, the O, and the Y, you really can do anything in the book. The possibilities are limitless. It goes over how to customize things to make them fit your family and your home and have your words and things that are special to you. So there's the top half of our Y. I'm going to finger press these open and then press them with the iron before I go ahead and sew the 2 rectangles together to complete the block. I have the top half. I'm going to press this. And you want to make sure you have the top and bottom halves pressed really well before sewing the 2 of them together, because we have in each case 3 pieces coming together at that point, and 3 pieces at that point and that point. So we're going to have 6 pieces coming together in each of these places, and the flatter that both of these are, the better chance of having success in putting these 2 together. Now, I haven't been doing a lot of pinning, but I am going to pin to make sure that I have the best chance possible of these lining up, because you don't want to end up with a Y that's like this or like this. I mean, a little bit off is okay, but I want to try and keep this as straight as possible. So I'm going to show you over at the machine how I'm going to pin that. So as I mentioned, I really want to make sure that these line up as best as possible. I could just fold the one on top of the other and eyeball it and hope for the best, which is not a bad way to go. You know, they do look like they're lining up pretty well. But the other option is hang pin. And so I'll do that on one side to show you in case you have never seen me show that before. So what a hang pin is a way of pinning 2 things together using a pin that will temporarily hang. So we are going to start on one piece and find the intersection where all of the points come together and stick our pin in. Check from the other side, make sure we're in the right place. And then we're going to take that same pin, and we're going to go in the right side of the next piece. And then we're going to hug these, make these 2 little pieces kiss and line up the way that they should. And we're going to let that pin hang, hence the name hang pin. Now we're going to take 2 other pins, and while that pin stays perfectly perpendicular, we don't want it to tilt one way or the other or anything. We want it to stay perfect little cross like that. We're going to put 1 pin in right here, and we're going to stick 1 pin in on the other side right here. And the goal is that those will now hold everything perfectly in place, because we have to take this pin out because we can't actually sew with a pin going into the bed of our sewing machine. So we're going to take the hang pin out, and these 2 should keep them lined up. And I'm just going to eyeball the other one, and we'll see how it turns out. And as I mentioned, I think with one of the other letters, there's not a ton of contrast between my 2 fabrics. The main contrast here really is between the 2 fabrics and the background. So my main focus is making sure that you are seeing a letter and that you will be able to read what letter it is. Not that every single point lines up everywhere. I'm not intentionally making it so my points don't line up, but I'm not stressing over every little thing. I'm just pretty much focused on, is this going to look like a Y? Will somebody be able to read that my table runner says joy? And use your stiletto and sew nice and slow. There's no race. I tend to make mistakes the faster I go. Things just can get awry pretty quickly. All right, so let's see how things lined up. Okay, they both turned out pretty good. I think the one that I did the hang pin on is perfect. And the one that I eyeballed is a little off. So goes to show you in this case, hang pin worked better, but that's not often enough that I'm going to take it apart. They're both really good. So I'm going to head on over to my iron and press this and take a look and see how it looks with my other 2 letters that I've already completed. All right, so I'm going to press that last seam. And since we got a lot of pieces coming together here, I'm going to use my heat resistant stiletto so that I make sure that I do not burn my finger, but I'm able to keep everything nice and flat. I'm going to press it from the front as well. I'm going to go grab my other 2 letters and take a look at how they all look together. There's my O. Here's my J. Oh, I'm so happy. These look fantastic. I am very excited to continue working on this. So next video in a few days, we are going to put this together into the table runner. So if you are behind or have any questions, go back to look at the J and the O videos. I am here, so please ask any questions you have in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel, click like on this video, and I will be back here in a couple days to show you how to put this all together into a table runner.